Good evening. What I am about to tell you will fundamentally change how you understand the future of American manufacturing. Toyota, the world's largest automaker, just made a decision that has American lawmakers in a state of panic, and most people completely missed it. The company is quietly moving its entire electric vehicle future to Canada. We are not talking about a small satellite facility or a token investment here. We are talking about a complete restructuring of where North America builds its cars. States that spent decades courting Toyota are now accusing the company of outright betrayal.
Building as we get closer to production at the Toyota battery plant.
That massive $14 billion facility at the Greensboro Randolph megasite is just weeks away from making their first shipments.
Toyota battery manufacturing.
And the real reason has nothing to do with what you have been hearing on the news. Let me start with the numbers that forced Toyota's hand. Because this was not a choice. This was survival math. The Trump administration's tariffs on Japanese exports created an $800 billion problem for Toyota. Not a theoretical problem, an $800 billion hole in their balance sheet that appeared practically overnight. To put that in perspective, that figure exceeds the entire gross domestic product of many countries. That is the kind of number that gets chief executives fired and boards completely restructured. The company's response was immediate and sobering. Toyota issued profit warnings projecting a 21% drop for fiscal year 2025. That is not a bad quarter. That is a catastrophic year for the world's most profitable automaker. We are talking about a company that has operated like clockwork for decades, suddenly facing existential uncertainty. Markets reacted accordingly. Investor confidence wavered. Analysts started questioning whether Toyota's entire North American strategy was even viable anymore. Here is exactly how it breaks down. The tariffs alone would cost Toyota $1.25 billion in earnings. Operating profits were projected to fall by roughly $5.1 billion due to currency fluctuations. Another $2.4 billion would vanish because of soaring material costs. And remember, Toyota was producing over 3 million vehicles in Japan annually, exporting around 542,000 of those directly to the United States. Every single one of those exports suddenly became a financial liability. American politicians immediately framed this as Toyota abandoning American workers. You had senators giving speeches about corporate loyalty and the importance of domestic manufacturing. But Toyota was not looking at workers. They were looking at a spreadsheet that said their entire North American strategy was about to collapse. This was not about patriotism or loyalty. This was about basic financial survival. Here's what really changed. The United States stopped being a place where Toyota could plan long-term investments with any confidence. And in the auto industry, long-term means decades, not quarters. You do not build a $5 billion electric vehicle facility based on a 5-year outlook. You need 20 years of regulatory stability to justify that kind of capital commitment. That is how the industry has always worked. You plan for generations, not election cycles. Instead, Toyota got chaos. Steel tariffs fluctuated without warning. Component tariffs changed based on which country officials were frustrated with that week. The dollar weakened, making imports more expensive, and throwing off carefully calculated cost projections. And the electric vehicle incentives, the very programs designed to encourage manufacturers to build in America, kept shifting every time Congress changed hands or a new administration took office. Projects that looked financially viable in January became questionable by June. Investments that made sense under one regulatory framework suddenly became liabilities under another. Toyota found itself constantly recalculating, constantly adjusting, constantly second-guessing decisions that should have been locked in years ago. That is not how you run a multi-billion-dollar manufacturing operation. That is how you run a failing startup. The cracks started showing in Kentucky, where Toyota's flagship electric vehicle production facility hit delays that pushed full-scale operations to mid-2026. That is years behind schedule for a company that prides itself on precision manufacturing and just-in-time production systems. Toyota literally wrote the book on manufacturing efficiency. The fact that they were missing deadlines spoke volumes about how unpredictable the American environment had become. If you are finding this report valuable, take a moment to subscribe and hit that like button. It helps us continue bringing you the stories that matter. Now here's the detail that really sealed America's fate. The United States could not supply the components Toyota needed to qualify for Inflation Reduction Act tax credits. The IRA was supposed to encourage domestic manufacturing, incentivize companies to build in America, and source American materials. But American suppliers could not meet the compliance standards the law required. The regulations were written by people who apparently did not understand that America had spent the last 30 years dismantling its materials processing infrastructure. So Toyota was stuck in an impossible position. Build in America without the tax credits and absorb billions in lost incentives, or find partners abroad who could actually deliver compliant materials and risk political backlash for not being American enough. Either way, the American advantage disappeared. While Washington was creating obstacles and arguing about policy, Ottawa was building solutions. Canada rolled out $6.44 billion to accelerate nickel, lithium, and cobalt projects. These are not future promises or political talking points. These are active mining operations scaling up right now, with equipment being installed and workers being hired. They prepared an additional $2 billion to expand extraction and refining capacity. Here is what most people do not understand. The United States has plenty of lithium deposits. Nevada, North Carolina, and other states have massive reserves sitting underground. What America does not have is refining capability at scale. You cannot just pull lithium out of the ground and put it in a battery. It has to be processed, refined, and manufactured into battery-grade materials through complex chemical processes requiring specialized facilities and trained personnel. America outsourced that expertise decades ago. Canada kept it. First Cobalt Corporation is building what will be the only cobalt refinery on the continent. That means Toyota can source a critical battery component domestically in North America without depending on China. Quebec and Ontario are establishing battery cell manufacturing facilities right next to the Michigan and Ohio auto belt. Not across the ocean. Right across the border where logistics are simple and transportation costs are minimal. The genius of Canada's strategy is geographic. They positioned these facilities close enough to traditional American auto manufacturing centers that Toyota can integrate them into existing supply chains without massive logistical overhauls. And crucially, these Canadian operations meet IRA compliance standards. So Toyota gets the American tax credits while manufacturing in a country that actually has the supply chain to support it. American taxpayers are subsidizing manufacturing that happens in Canada because American companies cannot meet the standards American politicians wrote into law. Canada also offered something equally important: consistency. The Canadian government, regardless of which party is in power, has maintained a stable policy environment for electric vehicle manufacturing. The mining incentives stay in place. The tax credits remain predictable. For a company planning investments that take 20 years to pay off, that stability is priceless. Toyota did not just make one investment in Canada. They created what industry insiders are calling an electric vehicle corridor, a manufacturing zone in Ontario and Quebec that integrates mining, refining, battery production, and final assembly in one geographic cluster. Honda committed $15 billion to an Ontario program. General Motors invested approximately $2 billion in Quebec for battery production. Each new investment strengthens the ecosystem. Here is the uncomfortable truth nobody wants to say. American policy created this situation. The tariffs, the regulatory uncertainty, the inability to build a domestic supply chain, those were all choices. Congress chose to write requirements that American suppliers could not meet. You cannot legislate capabilities into existence. The implications extend far beyond one company's manufacturing decisions. What we are witnessing is a fundamental realignment of where North America builds its cars. For decades, the American Midwest was the undisputed center of automotive manufacturing. But the electric vehicle transition scrambled everything. Here is what should worry American policymakers most. This is not reversible in the short term. You cannot build a cobalt refinery in 18 months. Mining projects take 5 to 10 years to develop. Even if the United States started today with unlimited funding, Canada has a decade head start. Toyota's move to Canada is not a betrayal of American workers. It is a rational response to American policy failures. The company needs stability, supply chain access, and regulatory predictability. Canada offers all three. The United States currently offers none. The question is not whether other automakers will follow Toyota's lead. The question is how quickly, and whether America will recognize what is happening before this shift becomes permanent.